Everyone has a fear of fire, right? No one wants to burn up in a fire. And if you can stoke that fear, it's easy to leave a law in place. To convince somebody that something that you've been led to believe all these years is protecting you isn't protecting you. And if you change it, children are going to burn up and die horrific deaths. Who wants to change that law?
I loved every day I went to work. Every time you go out that door, you're going out there for one reason, and that's to help somebody. And there's no better feeling in the world. I distinctly remember the smell of the soap when I washed my hands, the smell of the turnout coats with the smoke when I entered in this firehouse, looking out the back windows in the dormitory at nighttime, hoping that I was going to get a fire. I know it sounds sort of strange, but I wanted to test my skills. Being a firefighter, you don't think about the negative aspects of the job. You keep yourself in shape. You get sort of a feeling that you're infallible. I mean, it's just, there's nothing that you can't do. You're not going to get sick. You take care of yourself. You eat right. But I got bit in the ass, to put it bluntly. It was January the 5th. It was a winter morning. I was out for a run. About the last mile, I got to the point where I couldn't run anymore, and that had never happened to me before. I actually stopped and I walked. I felt really bad. Got back into the gym, went to the bathroom, and started to urinate, and I was peeing just blood. And within a week, I had a CT scan and was told that in my right kidney, I had transitional cell carcinoma, a rare form of cancer, normally found in 1 in 100,000 people, and normally found in people that work in the chemical industry. I was referred to a doctor at UCSF. He asked me what my profession was, and I told him I was a firefighter here in San Francisco. He goes, "Do you realize that you work in the chemical industry?" And I said, "Well, I've never really thought of it that way, but I guess I do." We walk into a room that could be 100, 130 different toxic chemicals in the air. You're dealing with flame retardants that are used on just about everything: clothing, textiles, furnishings. In the old days, that stuff didn't exist. But during my treatment and recovery, another firefighter here at Station 1 came down with transitional cell carcinoma. And then a third firefighter. And during this period of time, too, it seemed like every month somebody else would be diagnosed with some form of cancer. Every month we'd be going to another funeral of somebody else that had contracted it, that had retired and died. So it was an eye-opener. I mean, the realization was there that we were faced with a major problem.
Change the standard, that the standard should be changed to require more chemicals.
You can't get from A to Z because they've left that out.
What do they have to do with why Justice?
The 2008 Pulitzer was for a series we did called Hidden Hazards, which was about deadly baby products, dangerous baby products.
Anything from cribs to this Godzilla back here with lead paint on it. At the end of that story, a lot changed, thankfully. It was the biggest reform movement in the country to protect children and their products in a generation.
It was exciting to see that kind of result happen. We were working on a completely unrelated story that had to do with chemicals but not flame retardants. And I often, when I'm interviewing people, will ask at the end, so what didn't I ask you? Or what's interesting? And almost everyone we talked to said, well, what you really should be looking at is flame retardants.
Yeah, all couches seem to be different, you know.
Virtually every American home has flame retardants in their couch. And when you talk to people are surprised that there's flame retardants in couches and chairs. You know, they're just surprised by that fact alone. And, you know, these are chemicals that aren't measured by parts per billion or parts per million in a couch. It's measured by pounds and ounces.
It was the late 90s that the first studies were coming out raising alarms about flame retardants in terms of flame retardants accumulating in people and wildlife in places around the world that you would never in a million years think flame retardants. Suddenly, they had become controversial, and they weren't before. I don't think they were before.
Started in Sweden with scientists finding that these chemicals were building up in breast milk and then being passed on to the next generation. They were out there, and nobody really knew much about them or what they were doing in the environment. And I think it was a problem in general for environmental health researchers initially is why a lot of people didn't want to touch flame retardants is fire, people dying in fires. The idea that shouldn't we do whatever we can to prevent people from dying in fires? And it's hard to argue against that.
Better things for better living through chemistry for the finer world we want. Better things for better living through chemistry, that's the promise of DuPont. Every day that we are living is such a thrill that we can't stay nonchalant. Better things.
That mindset. This is the world we live in. This is one of the consequences of modern living, is having all of these chemicals in our body. And if we want, all of these conveniences, if we want safer houses, if we want nonstick pans, if we want jackets that repel water, all these different kinds of things, there are side effects or there are consequences that we just have to live with. And in terms of one school of thought, just because they're in our bodies doesn't mean that they're causing any harm. And yeah, you'll hear that. I don't see people whose arms and legs are falling off, so therefore, what's the big deal?
There's one thing to say that flame retardants are building up in the environment, they're building up in people, and that is alarming. They're building up in breast milk. I mean, that's alarming, right? But again, it's if they work well, then it's a little bit of a different. If they're all, if there is truly a huge threat of fire that we all face and they're protecting us from that threat on a daily basis, then it's sort of a different story.
When we waded into this topic, at the outset it did appear very complicated, and sometimes you do feel like you're a referee because, you have the industry on this side, you have some activists on this side, there's allegations going back and forth, and you do feel like you're going in there and say, wait a second, you're trying to figure out the truth.
We weren't out to get the chemical industry by any means on this. We're not advocates. We're not on one side or another here. We were trying to get to the bottom of this question and this legacy, really, that's been around since the 70s. And why do we have these chemicals in our lives? Why do we have them in our furniture? Why do we have them in our bodies? There were so many layers. It was like peeling an onion, There were so many layers to this, and so many of them were just rotten.
This is human tragedy. 10 minutes ago, we were looking at a football game. I now look at a sad and tragic sight.
Once a fire starts, People have no clue how fast it is.
And look at that! Oh, the poor man. Oh, this is awful.
I mean, I remember there was a soccer stadium fire in Bradford, England. It happened to be televised. The cameras were on the exact opposite end of the stadium. They were televising the match. They weren't seeing anything. Some stupid thing happened. Probably someone dropped a cigarette, maybe dropped a match, who knows what happens. But after seeing the video many times, I know exactly when the fire started.
That looks very nasty indeed.
And from that moment until the entire stadium, a massive big stadium, was on fire, was 8 minutes. It takes 8 minutes for a massive stadium to be completely engulfed in flames from a tiny little fire.
But what I can't tell you is how many people are injured, and I fear there may even have been somebody dead.
I work with the chemical fire retardant manufacturers. I mean, in case you didn't ask me that, but it's a well-known thing that I work with them. And, well, here we already have flashover. You see them extinguishing the fire. I believe in fire safety. We kill a lot of people in this country from fires. Upholstered furniture, we have a serious problem. Let's say a fire starts in the upholstered furniture sofa here. And you see the temperature rises and rises and rises until you reach a certain point when the temperature is risen enough that suddenly everything in that room, in that compartment, is burning. And from that moment, all bets are off. There's nothing else that's going to be able to save anything inside that compartment. That moment, that is the moment of flashover. 90% of the paddings, maybe even higher, of chairs are polyurethane foam based. Polyurethane foam is very flammable on its own. It burns very quickly, burns very fast. Well, if we put flame retardants in there, we get the insulating capability of the foam and the fire safety.
I was the first person ever to get a PhD degree in fire protection engineering. Back in the late 1980s, I was working for the federal government, and I did a very extensive study on a comparison between goods that did or did not have flame retardants.
They did ones that were completely non-fire retardant, the typical run-of-the-mill that you find in most households, and ones that were well fire retarded.
The really proof of the pudding is how does the furniture item burn in full scale.
What they found is that the safer furniture, the safer products, gave 15 times more time to escape. It was massive. I'm sorry, I mean, I'm an old man and I've run a lot of fire tests in my life, and flame retardants, in my view, should be one of the solutions, and something that just bans them out of hand is just wrong. Look at the size of the flame there.
Great pleasure. I welcome one of the giants in the prevention field, Andrew McGuire.
You know, it's hard to know what happens to a life or my life if you change a central event. When I was 7, on my birthday, I went in the kitchen and I turned on the oven. The hem of my flannel bathrobe ignited. My sister, who was 4, saw the flames coming up my back and screamed. And then I turned, saw the flames, and then I screamed and ran.
Why would they be afraid of it? There you go.
So I was on fire about 8, 9, 10 seconds at the most, and had third-degree burns on my legs and back, hands and head. What clicked for me was all of those burns that I'd seen in the burn center were totally preventable. My burn would have been preventable. I don't want someone else to go through that goddamn experience if it doesn't have to happen. Let's just do the right thing here. In 1978, I found out anecdotally that cigarette companies can make cigarettes self-extinguish and not cause fire deaths, not cause fires. And the number of fires and deaths from cigarettes, it's the leading cause of fire death in America, in the world.
I gotta say, when we first started working on this topic, the idea that big tobacco had a role in why we have flame retardants in our households.
That was really interesting. I mean, it was surprising. Who would have thought tobacco has anything to do with your couch, right? These are the days when a lot of people smoked. I think 40% of the country smoked. A lot of people smoked indoors. You know, offices, newsrooms were just a big cloud of smoke back then. And people were dying in furniture fires.
Federal investigators said today that a discarded cigarette was the likely cause of this Hilton hotel fire in Houston, March 6th, that killed 12 people.
There's no question about it. It was happening commonly. It was happening all over the country at a regular occurrence. So there were efforts afoot to try and change the cigarette, because that was what was igniting most of the fires.
In the last 10 years, significant steps have been made toward developing a federal fire-safe cigarette safety standard.
Up to that point, the industry response had been, we just can't do it. We can't make a cigarette that anyone's going to want to smoke that will extinguish on its own. It's just not feasible. They had a very successful, very lucrative product, and they were very leery of changing it.
Where we're taking on the major cause of fire death, the major cause of fire injury.
I was there. I testified. The cigarette industry said, it's not our problem. You should make furniture cigarette resistant. They said that in hearings.
The homes of America are filled with furniture that had not been treated to reduce its flammability. In fact, I can report that we have developed a method for applying a flame and smolder retardant in the home.
They had a flame retardant that you could go and spray everything in your environment with this flame retardant to prevent cigarettes from igniting it.
Fire retardants can save you thousands of dollars and possibly save your life.
That was their solution in 1983, the tobacco industry's solution to fires caused by cigarettes.
All right, so page 23. I started kind of noodling around on the tobacco document sites where there's this phenomenal repository of documents that the tobacco industry turned over to settle lawsuits. There's 13 million of them online. It's just an investigative reporter's dream. This issue of making a fire-safe cigarette was gaining some traction, and they were worried about it. They said neither industry response has been particularly effective in offsetting fire-scarred victims interviewed by the news media and paraded before legislative committees. Fire-scarred victims, that's what they feared.
We are not here as freaks parading before you for sympathy, but as burn victims who could have been any one of you but for the grace of God.
These companies, they don't want their product associated with burn injuries or fire deaths. That's a very tough marketing problem.
You start tampering with a cigarette, it is a very highly technical and complex undertaking.
The tobacco industry was repeatedly trying to shift the attention to the furniture that was going up in flames. What they realized, though, early on is they realized they lacked credibility, right? They were the tobacco industry. Tobacco was kind of wrote the playbook on this. They called it third-party defense. If we lack credibility, let's get someone else who's much more credible to do the arguing for us.
The Tobacco Institute, they bring in a guy named Peter Sparber. They hire him, and he's given the position Vice President, Tobacco Institute. Peter Sparber comes in 1982, and all of a sudden, within a couple of years of him being there, he helps organize a new group on the scene in America called the National Association of State Fire Marshals. National Association of State Fire Marshals. Sounds credible, doesn't it?
You organize the National Association of State Fire Marshals. They're the senior firefighting officials in the states. And Peter Sparber was able to a certain degree, infiltrate this organization of fire marshals.
We've clearly demonstrated that what we have done has significantly reduced fire deaths.
The National Association of State Fire Marshals believes more lives can be saved. It wants tough federal standards for all upholstered furniture sold in this country.
It was extraordinarily cunning and, to a certain degree, brilliant. Who would have thought that fire officials would be sort of speaking tobacco's talking points and winning? That's what really got me. What they were arguing was that the better way to do this is to fireproof furniture. The better way to do this is to fireproof furniture. Focus on the fuel rather than the ignition. The fuel being the furniture that's going up in flames.
Everyone believes that you can't take on the tobacco industry. It's too big, it's too powerful. And probably that's the single leading cause in nothing happening, is that people don't think it's possible. And I do.
There is one regulation. It's called Technical Bulletin 117. It took effect in the state of California in 1975. It's the only regulation in the world. No other state, no other nation in the world has this standard.
All upholstered furniture sold or offered for sale by a manufacturer or wholesale for use in this state, etc., shall be fire retardant and shall be labeled in a manner... I was a government regulator for 30 years, and so it's almost like in my genes, and I was responsible for safety, and I was trying to do the best job I could for safety.
Gordon DeMont is in charge of the California Bureau of Home Furnishings. For our program, DeMont set up 10 miniature overstuffed chairs made of a cotton batting stuffing and covered with a cotton velvet fabric.
Conceivably, it could be up to a period of 30 years until we have an entire population of furniture which is in fact cigarette resistant.
In those
there was a lot of politics involved. On some of the early versions of the standard that I wrote, I specifically indicated that if any flame retardant chemicals of any type had to be added to products in order to achieve compliance with the standard, that there should not be any negative effect in terms of adverse health impacts. That was removed from the standard.
So it was a solution from 1975 in California, and it went totally below the radar screen. No one knew this happened. The only people who knew that it happened was the furniture industry. And they ultimately went along with it because it was just California. But eventually, after the years went by from 1975 on, they had to do it for the rest of the country. They had to do it for Canada because it was too difficult to make furniture for California with poison in the foam, and then storehouse furniture for other states and countries with no poison in the foam. So they just said, let's just put poison in all the foam. Because California market is so huge, it's in all your furniture throughout the country.
It's called Technical Bulletin 117, TB 117. And if you go home and look at your couches, you will probably find TB 117 labels on your couches. And it's not a very good standard. It says that the foam inside your furniture won't burn when exposed to a small flame for 12 seconds. So if you do a thought experiment and you think about what happens if you drop a candle on your couch, what burns first? Fabric. And when fabric burns, do you still have a teeny flame? You have a big flame. And then the furniture, the foam burns in maybe 2 or 3 seconds. And when foam burns in the presence of organohalogen, it gives off way more carbon monoxide, soot, and smoke. And what kills people in fires? Toxic gases. So we have the standard.
No, I think that's Arlene Bloom, age 33, a biochemist at the University of California at Berkeley. She studies environmental chemicals that may cause cancer. Organizing the first major all-woman American expedition to the Himalayas has been her dream for 6 years.
I had a choice between going to try to be the first American woman to climb Mount Everest or writing a paper about the toxic chemicals in kids' pajamas. So I had a lot of indecision. So what would you do? How many of you would go to Mount Everest? How many of you would stay and write the paper about the kids' pajamas? Okay. Well, I did both. So the chemical was called brominated tris, and this was in the mid-70s. And we found a little girl who'd never worn tris-treated pajamas. So we put her in the pajamas, and we collected her urine. And the next day, there were tris breakdown products in her urine. Does that sound good? And they were cancer-causing chemicals that we were finding in this little girl's urine. I flew my tris flag at about 24,000 feet and sent my paper by mail runner back to Berkeley to be published. It's unusual, but it worked. 3 months after we wrote the paper, tris was removed from kids' pajamas. However, today chlorinated tris is the most commonly used flame retardant in our furniture and baby products. So here we got it out of kids' pajamas in the 70s, but it's back today in our furniture, our baby products.
So now I can understand how they wouldn't want to speak at the hearing because there'd be hooting and hollering, and then that would be...
What we're doing is we're testing all of these mattresses and nap mats for toxic chemicals. So this is the kind of thing that my daughter Gigi is sleeping on today at preschool. So she sleeps on this, and it's soft, and the reason it's soft is it's got polyurethane foam in it. Here, it's cut out because we had to test the polyurethane foam. That's how we know it has these toxic chemicals in it. Now, if you think about when you squeeze a nap mat and some of the air comes out, that air contains a vapor of a carcinogen, and it's right in the breathing space of the child that just squeezed it by putting their head down. That's crazy and horrifying for a guy whose 4-year-old daughter is probably in nap time right now at preschool.
If you've ever sat with the light coming in just right into a window and you see someone sit down, when you sit, there's a little poof of dust that comes up. And the flame retardants are a part of the foam, but they're not bound very tightly. These chemicals come out of the foam, and they like to attach to dust particles, which then eventually come back down and either form a film on your couch or on the floor, which is where most kids spend most of their time. They're getting more exposure because they're touching everything and then putting their hands in their mouth. And they've been linked to a number of health problems.
This is one of my favorite slides. It's an ad in the 50s for DDT wallpaper in Walt Disney Designs. And what that 50s mom who's lovingly tucking in her little baby doesn't realize is her little baby's chance of breast cancer is much higher because of the DDT wallpaper. And that's the thing about organohalogens. It's not like they give you a burn or a rash. They go into your body, they stay, and over the course of your life, they can cause serious health problems.
And the very same thing that makes them desirable to chemical companies as a flame retardant, in many cases, is the very same thing that worries people who study environmental health. They can be kind of volatile. They can travel widely from where they originally start out at. And they also often can bioaccumulate, and they're toxic. It's like a trifecta of concern with flame retardant chemicals in this country today.
So we have one little chemistry lesson. If we look at that molecule on the top, you have a polybrominated diphenyl ether.
PBDEs.
PBDEs, they're found in over 90% of Americans' bodies. They're found in breast milk and blood and urine and even in amniotic fluid.
And they accumulate up the food chain. And way at the top of the food chain is a nursing baby. Marine mammals are nursing babies. So our children have 3 times the level of adults. So these are chemicals we have about a pound in your house. Women with higher levels take twice as long to become pregnant. Children, when they have higher levels at birth, have 4 to 6 points less IQ permanently. There's a number of studies trying to relate them to autism. There are literally thousands of papers showing harm from these flame retardants.
Increased rates of childhood learning and behavioral problems. Increased rates of birth defects. Adulthood cancers like testicular cancer. And there is some good evidence that flame retardants are contributing to the increased rates of cancer in our firefighters. Because the flame retardants and their chemical structure, when they're burned and when they are volatilized or vaporized into the air, they form these toxic chemicals, specifically things like dioxins and furans, which are known cancer-causing chemicals. And fires that have flame retardants actually turn out to be more toxic than fires that don't have these chemicals.
I know when you guys took the job, and I know when I took the job, I didn't give a damn what we were coming in contact with when we went into a building on fire. The object was to knock the fire down as fast as we could in the city, and if there was life involved, to save a life. Tom, what do you think?
I think it's important that we realize that these fires that we're going to now are just an absolute toxic soup, the environment we're entering into. It's 3 Mile Island. It's Love Canal, and it's on fire. And those chemicals are sticking on our equipment. Those chemicals are sticking on our skin.
We're seeing more and more breast cancer now in the female firefighters, and we have the highest percentage of female firefighters in the United States, if not in the world.
All right. Do you remember this one? I watched the rig disappear around the corner. I know what my firehouse family will do. When they get to the fire, they'll put on their air masks and grab the hoses. Many of our women were getting breast cancer. And, I mean, I remember thinking, wow, is this a high number? Or is this just normal? Is this what just happens in our lives?
My first fire was on 45 Yosemite Avenue in San Francisco off of 3rd Street. Go up the stairs, I look right, there's nothing. It's dark, but there's no more heat, there's no sound. I look left, I see orange glow, it's loud. Oh, we're going that way. My officer taps me on the shoulder, he goes, oh,
When Allison got sick, her partner was pregnant. And I remember I helped gather the exposure reports. The stations were great. Everybody helped me gather the report. They went through all the journals, and I was really blown away. I didn't buy all the toxins we're exposed to. Allison's death was probably the biggest event in my adult life. She was my colleague, and it really hit home. It hit home about what we're exposed to, and that you can get really sick and be this vibrant, healthy, powerful person and have all the fight in you want and not live. It changed my perspective on my job. Or it didn't change my love of the job, it changed my realization about what the job was and how much I was exposed to. And I remember at the same time I had learned a little while before that there were toxins in breast milk. I had talked to Tony. I asked about that and he said, oh, there is research on it and they are finding it from flame retardants. And I thought, from flame retardants? Here I was, I had breastfed my first child. I thought I was giving him the healthiest thing I could possibly give him, going back to work and still breastfeeding. And I thought, what did I feed him?
Or maybe they're going too fast.
Now I feel like, well, all I can do, at least now I know that 117 exists and that I should read the label. But most people have no idea then. They have no idea, and they think the same thing I do. They think, I've got this nice safe car seat, this nice safe stroller, this great breast pillow.
All right, what are you thankful for today?
I'm really thankful for the pasta.
That's a good one. I'm thankful.
It seems like something's wrong with this picture. If it was banned in kids' pajamas decades ago, why is it still in so many products? Because it's a lot less likely that my child is going to catch on fire when I'm breastfeeding than it is that they might get exposures to toxins. It doesn't take a scientist to figure that one out.
They'll put out the flames.
You have sort of an untold public health threat that's in everyone's home. It's in everybody's home. You know, the industry has worked really hard to downplay that health risk and to promote this idea that flame retardants are working.
But if the science shows that these chemicals don't really even work the way they're used, then why are we getting the potential risk and none of the benefit or the purported benefit? The people who make these chemicals don't really want people to ask that question.
Flame retardants are also an important part of the fire safety toolbox, yet they go unnoticed and in some cases are misunderstood.
A major reason for the reduction of the fires is the fact that flame retardants have been incorporated into so many materials in the home.
We first contacted the American Chemistry Council and asked them for, proof that flame retardants work. We just wanted to know. This is very early on in our reporting, and they gave us the government study by Vito Barbauskas. One of the findings was that flame retardants would give people in maybe a residential home a 15 times fold escape time in a fire. If you had flame retardants in your home, you would have 15 times more time to escape if those things caught on fire. That's what the industry said. That's not what the study said. That was completely wrong, and it was easy to prove because we went to the main author of that study and said, here's what they're saying your study says, is that true? And he said, absolutely not, they're distorting it.
There was something very narrow and specific and specialized about that study. All of the products we tested were cost no object, state-of-the-art materials.
The items that were tested were not tested under real-world conditions. These items had NASA-style flame retardants added to it. They used the most potent, expensive flame retardants, and they put these in these experimental items, and lo and behold, it proved that flame retardants work.
But that is not the furniture when we go into a retailer and say, I want a new living room sofa.
And so the industry said, look, this study shows that you get 15 times fold escape time, but no, not unless your furniture is made by NASA, you won't.
Now, California and TB 117 is basically the opposite extreme of the scale. They put in a very small amount on the order of 3 to 5%. And once you do that, you get the worst of both possible worlds. These pieces of foam are tested naked, just a piece of foam. Now, I know absolutely nobody who has in his living room a piece of naked foam that they sit on.
It's just plain old, this is from my house actually. We redecorated, my wife said I could have this one. What we've got here is a piece of foam that we took out and that was tested, and it has the penta in it, which is a pentabromo diphenyl ether. And let's see if we can make a piece that will cover up with a piece of fabric. What we found is that when the fabric catches fire, if it catches fire, you can end up with a much bigger flame. And when you have a really large flame, we found that the materials used, even if they've been treated with fire retardants, can burn. And in fact, when they do burn, they can produce smoke that can be more toxic than untreated materials. That's a pretty intense fire with a lot of smoke coming off.
And that foam was...
This foam passes TB117.
You get maybe a slight benefit of a few seconds of ignition time, something like that from a fire safety point of view, but you do get great gobs more of noxious chemicals that are put out in the smoke, and they are going to be toxic to human beings.
Vito Bobrowskis, he explained to me that by the time the fabric cover burns and the flames reach the foam inside that's treated with flame retardants, what he said to me was, the fire just laughs at it.
That was a study that was sort of easy to disprove because the author himself, after many, many years, came out and said, no, they're distorting and I want them to stop.
So they manipulated your research to suit their needs?
Well, in an exceedingly blatant and a disgraceful way, yes.
And they wouldn't stop. They just kept going. It made me think that some of these other studies that they've been using over the years, might have similar problems. Then they came up with the Simonson study, saying that this study out of Sweden proved all these things.
There have been several studies, particularly in Sweden, the Swedish National Research and Testing Lab, SP, what Margaret Simonson and her group at SP found is that you have orders of magnitude better environment from the point of view of toxicity when you have materials that are, products that are more fire safe. It's just incredible.
And if you drill down on this study, you'll find that it's the foundation of all those broad claims are a obscure study, so obscure that it's only available in Swedish. It's a government report out of Sweden 15 years ago that has nothing to do with flame retardants. And the study is so obscure, the industry doesn't have a copy. You can't find it online. It's not published anywhere. And we had to go to the only library in the world that I could find that has a copy of it, the National Library of Sweden, to get a copy. And then we had it translated to English. And what you'll find is that all these broad claims that they've been making are based on 8 TB fires that occurred outside of Stockholm in 95 and 96. Well, that logic is so fundamentally flawed because it's such a small sample. But once they made that claim that because of those 8 TV fires, flame retardants work, they used that finding and that logic to do other studies. So then they could say, well, it reduces pollution because there's fewer fires. It saves society millions of dollars because flame retardants work. It saves money. Basically, that's the main study that they highlight. I thought there would be a lot of studies that support that flame retardants work. The industry would have more they'd have more ammunition than what they had. They basically had 2, and both of their arguments were really fundamentally flawed.
With a normal cover.
As far as furniture goes, when we looked into it, we found that government scientists and independent scientists have looked at this over and over again and have found they provide no meaningful benefit for consumers. And so they don't work.
Now, the good news is fire-related deaths have decreased significantly, not only in this country, but throughout the Western world, because we have rightfully required that all new construction have sprinkler systems and smoke alarms, and that cigarettes self-extinguish. So we've changed the way we deal with fire risk already.
The second thing is There are ways to mandate that the fabric meet a certain weave and thickness standard with no chemicals added that makes it resistant to fire caused by small flames or cigarettes even. It helps with the cigarette problem. And all of that has nothing to do with chemicals.
My view is today you can have fire safety without the use of fly retardant chemicals.
So again, then why are we requiring that products be made with these potentially and known dangerous chemicals?
When I contracted cancer, I got to the point where I had run out, or was close to running out of my sick time, my vacation time. I got to the point where there was going to be no money coming into my house for my family, my 2 sons. At that time, I was a captain. There was approximately 200 officers that were able to donate time to me, and just about every single one of those 200 that had time donated time to me so I could continue to go through my treatment recovery and put a paycheck on my table. I called every single one of those people up and thanked them for what they did, but I didn't think it was enough. And then a crazy thing happened. I was involved in a pretty lousy cycling accident. I was out getting some exercise and got hit by a pickup truck. My doctor at UCSF told me, "Tony, you're here for a reason." It was in the back of my mind, and I said, "You know, Doc, you're right. I'm going to try to put a nonprofit foundation together and work toward preventing cancer in firefighters here in the city."
What are you hoping is going to happen today? What are you looking forward to?
Well, it's the first time our foundation's actually had a sit-down roundtable conference with researchers in the cancer field. We're hoping to get a game plan together here in San Francisco to look at the problem we have with both the men and the women in this department contracting cancers at pretty alarming rates. We are fully aware of a Technical Bulletin 117 that has been put in place since the 1970s here in the state of California that has to deal with flame retardants. We know that it's an outdated standard. We know that the chemicals they use are carcinogenic. We know that they off-gas, during a fire, that off-gases furans and dioxin.
I mean, this is a fundamental shift for us. Like, how many of you have walked into the station and you can smell smoke and you go, they had a fire last night. We've all done that. When I hear all this, I want to either go, la, 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 because I like my job, la, 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 or run out of the room.
You know, one of the challenges we face in doing advocacy work is, you know, the chemical industry, which would like to continue to create these chemicals, are requiring or trying to sell the fact that we need incontrovertible evidence to take steps to regulate these chemicals. You can't experiment on human beings. The closest we do is what we do to you, really, which is we send you into a bunch of really toxic environments and you come out and we see what happens. And we don't even look that closely at what happens, and we should. And I think that's part of what we're trying to say here. But we're never, even if...
I've had coworkers die in fires, and I've had a lot more die of cancer. It seems important that we do something. Before I joined the fire department, I was in research, working at UCSF. And so I ended up learning from Tony that they could use some help. Tony was starting to do research to try and link the specific chemicals that are released at different kinds of fires. I thought, I would love to do this. This is fascinating. I can cross-reference it online and try and find out what's out there and make this a little easier, not to stop what we do, but to educate us. We have to make sure we're safe so we can then take care of other people.
Years ago when Tony and I started this, in order to get attention for it, we put a pair of boots out on the steps of City Hall for every firefighter who died with their boots off. We wanted the world to know that a lot of firefighters die in a hospice. They die in a hospital bed or they die at home. And they don't get the folded flag, they don't get the hero ceremony, but they should. And this is the first time since Tony and I have started this that I feel like someone's listening to our call for help. So I wanted to thank you very much for doing this.
We have a problem, we're contracting cancer. We can do so much to protect ourselves, but if we could eliminate the problem to begin with, the problem no longer exists.
Here we have this unique situation. California is, in a sense, causing poisoning of the country and Canada, and maybe the world, when we should stop it here in its tracks. And so, how do you stop that?
You know, there's always a chance it could get through the assembly. If we don't try, we'll never get anywhere.
We were trying to work with the industry over the somewhere 5, 6, 7 years ago. One of my staffers suggested that I go to Berkeley on a Sunday night for a dinner party that a chemist from UC Berkeley was hosting at her home. This would be Arlene Bloom, and that there would be some other community activists there, and the subject matter was the proliferation of brominated and chlorinated flame retardants in consumer products, and that Arlene was going to suggest that I author a bill that would ban these chemicals from these products and begin to mitigate some of the damage that's been done to the environment.
I think there's a snowball rolling here.
So maybe we might need to adjust this myth a little bit to reflect the Great Britain thing head on. So there's going to be above them agencies that are going to have to rule in.
The reason there are fewer fire deaths is because of fire sprinklers and smoke detectors and not flame retardants.
We need to organize the key people who should be interested in this.
Pulling these pieces together, calendaring out what the next couple months up to a year is going to look like. If we show that you can prevent these chemicals from being out there, that you don't have to go to the store and try and be a chemist and look at every single label and, you know, spend more money or just not know if you're buying the safest thing for your family. If we can change that on the front end, that's what I'm dedicating my time to.
Welcome, Don. We were just talking about you. Oh, look what he brought, his nursing pillow. He's got a new baby. And there's chlorinated trust inside.
In a way, I fault the scientific community for not being more vocal in talking about these sort of things. And so to me, the more scientists we get involved in the combustion aspects of this and the health aspects of this, the better the answer we're going to get.
So, Dr. Vito Babrauskas, we're very pleased to have you here today.
Thank you, sir.
I felt an ethical obligation that I really don't want my profession to do harm in the name of promoting fire safety.
The group that was lined up in support of changing Technical Bulletin 117, it wasn't just a few environmental activists. You know, it was firefighters who had been sick, and it was nursing moms, and it was public health advocates, and it was scientists. It was a diverse group.
Ultimately, here's what it all boils down to. My work of 40 years boils down to this. Either you have people behind you or money behind you. And we don't have the money.
Yep. Boat mail today. Look, it's boat mail today.
And we need the plumber to come out.
This is an island of 350 people. Literally, you have to be involved to live in this town. Oh, I don't want to kiss that baby. So I grew up with a sense that if you want to fix something, everybody has got to pitch in and help. Wait, let me see on... I think I had a cell phone for her somewhere.
I'd like to introduce main speaker of the House, Representative Hannah Pingree.
I think I was 2003, 2004. I was a freshman legislator, and a group of folks who work on environmental issues said, you know, we're thinking about putting forward this bill to ban the group of brominated flame retardants, and we need a legislator who's kind of willing to take on a fight against the chemical industry. And for some reason, they decided that a 25-year-old legislator was the right choice. And of course, you know, I was up for big fights, and I was like, let's go for it. When they first came to me, you know, even the name of all the chemicals, penta, octa, deca, I mean, it was like chemical soup. But the more I learned about the issue, the more I thought, this is absolutely outrageous that, our entire environment is filled with these chemicals and no one's really talking about it, no one's really taking action on it. I had my own body tested in 2006 for toxic chemicals. I said, I'm willing to do this. I was one of 13 Mainers tested. I said, I'm willing to do this for the sake of, good public policy and science. Sure, you can have my hair, blood, and urine. I always thought, here I am. I grew up in this beautiful island off the coast of Maine. I spent a few years living in cities, but I've mostly lived on this island or in this very clean place. So when I had my body tested, I assumed I would be better off than most of the people who lived, even in more industrial areas of my state. But when the results came back and I saw that I had all these chemicals in my bodies, including flame retardants, including mercury and arsenic and, BPA and phthalates, at levels that were high enough to impact my health or the health of a developing, child, I suddenly, I went from being a policymaker who cared about this to a person who was, really angry about the fact that this could be impacting my health. It's one thing to say to the chemical industry, more Americans have these flame retardants in them compared to Europe where they've started to phase them out, and you can make a real technical argument. But when you can say, I have these flame retardants in me, and, it makes me angry. Maine doesn't require flame retardants to be in our couches or computers. This came from, the state of California, and that's now impacting me all the way up in the other coast in Maine. It's a good lesson in public policy, but it's also something that should make a lot of people angry.
I ask you to consider today that the real motivation of our opponents is to sell more fire retardants at any cost, including the health and safety not only of our kids, but of every human generation hereafter through genetic mutation and lingering poisons that have contaminated our homes, our waters, our wildlife, and even our mother's milk. AB 706 provides a robust framework.
The first time that we introduced a bill on this subject, the chemical industry spent over $6 million on a multi-million-dollar campaign of full-page color ads in newspapers up and down the state of California, radio commercials, robocalls, mailers to households, and television commercials urging voters to contact their state legislator to vote against this bill.
The California legislature is considering a bill that will endanger our children. We cannot afford to take our safety for granted.
The furnishings inside the average home will contribute to most of the flame spread and fire spread. So those furnishings need to be protected by a fire retardant material.
They ran television commercials on TV in Maine for weeks saying that Maine legislators were trying to ban this flame retardant that would literally cause people's homes to burn down. They spent hundreds of thousands of dollars to try to convince the Maine people that the Maine legislature was about to do something very dangerous.
And the entire campaign was based on fear that your house will burn down, your child will die of flames.
I care about flame retardants and fire safety because I see what happens to burn survivors every day, and I go through it myself every day. And as a result of that, I cannot support legislation which threatens to remove flame retardants from fabrics and other things that protect our people.
Say no to laws that put our children in danger.
This whole campaign of TV ads and newspaper ads and, hiring an army of lobbyists, that's not something Maine sees very often. That happens maybe more often in New York or California, but that never happens in Maine.
Why would we want to tie ourselves to something 35 years old and close our minds to any possibility that we might know more now and there might be a better way to address fire safety?
There was a bill in California that would have changed Technical Bulletin 117. I went to that really not knowing what I was going to see.
You're going to hear a lot of conflicting testimony today, and what I'd like to do is just to remind you.
And there was a group called Citizens for Fire Safety that was fighting it. And I was really curious about Citizens for Fire Safety, really curious.
Mr. Chairman, members, Joe Lang representing Citizens for Fire Safety Institute.
Rumor on the street was that Citizens for Fire Safety was the chemical industry. But I didn't see evidence that proved it. Was it really a front group? That was one of the questions. And I have to be able to pin it down. I have to be able to document it. It's not just rumor and innuendo. You got to prove it. And I think what fascinated me about Citizens for Fire Safety from the get-go was their website. It had this picture of these 5 smiling children holding up a banner that said fire safety with a little heart dotting the I. And behind them is a red brick fire station. You know, it could be on any corner in America. It was this very wholesome Americana kind of picture of we're all about fire safety. Okay, so what they said was that they were a coalition of fire professionals, educators, community activists, burn centers, doctors, fire departments, and industry leaders united to ensure that our country is protected by the highest standards of fire safety.
We already have the highest fire safety standard of any state in the country. To change that standard and yet somehow not compromise fire safety, it's just, it's not logical, it doesn't make sense, and it can't be done.
You know, right from the start, lots of chemical industry people showed up and told us that all the science that had come out was false and everything we were saying was baloney. So clearly, they had a lot at stake. I mean, this young legislator in this tiny state of Maine was taking on a chemical that was making a lot of money for them.
Flame retardants are important to do the job to save lives. Thank you.
My name is Tony Stefani. I'm a retired captain with the San Francisco Fire Department. I spoke on behalf of Senate Bill 147, and I watched the state senators on this subcommittee actually not even pay attention to the testimony that was being given by experts, scientists that say that this technical bulletin has to be changed. There are safer products out there that can be used. But I did see them perk up when they had people there from the chemical industry talk. It was pretty discouraging.
But if we continue to ban chemicals that are developed before they're used, we won't have any chemicals in use. And you won't be able to create the new jobs that people want to create here in California.
And I do want to point out once again that as I was surrounded by this opposition, I was the only one at this table that was not receiving dollars from the chemical industry.
AstroTurf organizations are a phenomenon that's from the, sort of the mid to late 20th century, where corporate America decided, there's ways to create phony groups that appear to be consumer groups, but what they do and work on is our agenda. So what do is a quote-unquote citizen nonprofit doing fire prevention. They give grants to fire departments.
They work their way in with their line of BS. They donate money to different funding activities that a fire department might be doing. But the back lot activity is sort of sickening.
A couple partners called and asked us about flame retardants. They were all communities of color, and they had been contacted by Citizens for Fire Safety because Citizens for Fire Safety was saying that your community is affected more by fires, therefore this legislation in California is going to cause more fires and deaths in your community.
Tim Martinez, Hispanic Chamber of Stanislaus County. We oppose the measure. Thank you.
They convinced them that these are crazy environmentalists and all they want to do is, all they want to do is protect the environment, not people.
My name is Kiki Vo. I'm a burn survivor, and I greatly oppose this bill.
We are outraged. It's exploitation. It's manipulative.
Imagine hearing someone you love say, "I love you." And that might be the last time that you will hear them say that. So please vote no on SB 772 and keep us safe from fire.
Thank you for your testimony.
So, when you look into Citizens for Fire Safety, here's what you find. People think that investigative reporting is, meeting with mysterious tipsters in parking garages, and mostly it's just looking through really boring documents and finding little puzzle pieces, little gems. So this is one of the gems. So this is the 2010 franchise tax report that they filed with the state of Delaware, and you have to list your headquarters, your principal place of business. And sure enough, when I looked up this address in Reno, Nevada, it's just a mail forwarding service. It literally is. 24-hour access at a prestigious California Avenue address in tax-free Nevada. So its headquarters, according to this form, is a mail forwarding service. That piqued my interest. But again, I still didn't have who are the members. There's still a chance that they could be truly a broad coalition, right? So sure enough, good old California Form 602. You have to list the number of members in your association. It says check appropriate box. So they check the 50 or less. Well, in parentheses, it says provide names of all members on an attachment. So you would think there'd be an attachment there, right? This is all online. If you look at that document, there's no attachment. There was no list. So I asked the Secretary of State's office in California to go through their archives and find that list. It's a public record. It's not like I was asking for a favor. It's public record. It should have been in there. So sure enough, the day that this arrived, it was a very, very big day for me, because here is the list of the Citizens for Fire Safety Institute member list. Take a look. Is it a broad coalition? No. It is the 3 largest makers of flame retardants in the world. And ultimately, one of my colleagues flew over the plant where they make their flame retardants, and it's not a red brick fire station. It's an industrial compound and everything you would imagine a chemical company would be. This is one of those moments, though, in the reporting where had they showed up and said, you know, we are the voice of the chemical industry, and here's the reasons why we think this law is wrong, I might have walked away from it at that point. But that's not what they did. They were lying. The group was presenting itself as something it was not. And it was presenting itself to the public, it was presenting itself to firefighters, it was presenting itself to state legislatures as something it wasn't.
Chemical industry had a huge amount of money, lots of scare tactics. They were doing everything possible. They spent hundreds of thousands of dollars to try to influence Mainers and Maine legislators, and they had so little impact in the end. I mean, we had pregnant women and public health groups and firefighters all coming to say, this chemical is bad for people's health. There are safer alternatives. It needs to go. He ended up, I think, passing nearly unanimously. I mean, we had people on both sides of the aisle deciding that this was the right thing to do. As soon as I took on that one first bill, I think I sponsored 4 or 5 more after that. Maine had this great system of clean elections. I could run for the House of Representatives with $5,000 and literally just knocking on the doors of my neighbors. I didn't have TV ads. I didn't have anything like that. See ya. I also think people in Maine don't appreciate a lot of out-of-state money coming in, and they knew from these TV ads that were very slick and very extreme that some kind of wool was being pulled over their eyes. Clearly, despite spending a lot of money, the public didn't call after seeing all those TV ads. They didn't show up and protest. They said, good for you, Maine legislators. Like, I don't trust the chemical industry. Didn't pan out that way in California.
I'm wonderfully naive when I jump into a subject matter. I had no clue the kind of opposition we were going to be facing.
To determine the safety of chemicals used to meet California's...
The first year we just wanted an outright ban, get these chemicals out, and the industry easily defeated us.
Which will achieve equivalent.
So then we decided we'll take another stab at it. We're talking about cribs and strollers and backpacks. Again, items that children have the most daily and intimate contact with. The federal government has determined no fire risk. In fact, we were defeated by the chemical industry yet again. But so then we thought, okay, we'll address it in another way. What if we allowed for some other method of meeting the fire safety standard? Let the consumer decide. When you hear these business interests arguing against deregulation, I think there's some irony in that. Regulation's working just fine for us governments stay out of our lives. I would ask for your aye vote. Yet another time, neurological and developmental impairments, reduced IQ, endocrine disruption, and cancer. We were defeated yet again. One of the unfortunate aspects of the business in which I find myself as a lawmaker is that we have a symbiotic relationship with the lobbying industry. What I think a lot of voters don't understand is that the very lobbyist who may be in my office trying to convince me that their point of view on a particular issue is the point of view that I should hold so that I will vote in a particular way, is the very same individual that I may be calling from across the street 3 days later to invite to my quarterly fundraiser and asking for a contribution. And it could look very crass and quid pro quo, and I'm not blaming any of my colleagues for anything, because it's not a good system at its core.
Whether it's lead, mercury, or flame retardants, the assumption is that somebody's minding the store and that somebody's trying to prevent harm and prevent exposure. And we have this burden of proof to show you that we've been harmed. That's a standard that is very difficult for many communities to meet. And they rely on you to protect them from this. And their assumption is that somebody is preventing these chemicals from getting in the environment and getting in our bodies and leaving a legacy of contamination for our grandchildren and nephews and nieces. Thank you.
People assume the government is keeping us safe and protecting us from this kind of behavior, but that's actually not true. It's not true, and why should a small nonprofit with 25 staff have to do something to protect people from companies that have literally billions of dollars and thousands or even tens or hundreds of thousands of employees? That's just not right.
Whenever I hear that the EPA is this awful, Nazi-like organization that is coming down hard on businesses and whatnot, we've got this very perverse system right now.
There's 84,000 chemicals being used in commerce. 84,000 chemicals. Almost none of those have been tested adequately for their health impacts.
This law, the Toxic Substances Control Act from 1976, most of the chemicals that were already on the market were just rolled in and said, everything's fine.
How one agency can then do the science on 84,000 chemicals with another 1,000 or so being invented each year and say categorically, this one's safe, this one's not safe, on the budget they have, is just ridiculous.
Especially in an era when Congress is cutting budgets and saying that the EPA should do less. I think the best thing I've ever heard about this is from a researcher at NYU who said that we are in the middle of a giant, uncontrolled experiment on American children. It's not just with flame retardants, it's with scores of these toxic chemicals that are in our baby products, that are in our toys, that are in our furniture, our TVs, basically everything that's in our homes. Most of the chemicals that are in those products haven't been tested. Or if they have been tested, it's very difficult to do anything about them if those tests found that they cause harm.
There is going to be eventually some change. And the reason there's going to be some change is the system is so profoundly broken that sooner or later something will give.
What do they have to do with an arson study from the Department of Justice? Why would you do that
In our series, we called this a decades-long campaign of deception. We talked about how they distorted science. We talked about Citizens for Fire Safety being a front group. Those are not words I throw about trivially. Those are words that we back up with documents that show deception.
Some editors read through it, our lawyers read through this material. Everything has to be completely factual. You have to have every nuance correct, because you don't want at the end of the day, someone picking up the newspaper and saying, well, you missed this little fact. You don't want to make one little error, because if they say, you know, he got this wrong, imagine all the other things that are wrong in here. And so, I mean, that means everything to us.
You never know. You never know when you write a story what's going to resonate with people. So you kind of put it out there and hope that people are going to read it, and hope that someone's going to read it and it's going to empower somebody to try and solve a problem, right?
The science doesn't reach people the way journalism does.
But there's got to be ultimately national, over and over media coverage for this issue to rise to the level it should be at in the public consciousness. And when the public is educated and knows about it, then our advocacy efforts, our lobbying efforts with no money in state capitals or at the federal level have power.
It seemed like it just wasn't going to happen this year, and that we should instead redirect our focus on the governor. And this has been working out.
The governor issued an amazing press release, which he wrote himself, that was so accurate on the lack of fire safety benefit and all the harm from the flame retardants.
The first regulation in '75, that's a reform. But what I've found is that every reform at some point needs a reform. And there's been resistance because you have a reform, someone figures out a way to satisfy it, fix the foam up, fill it full of chemicals, make lots of money, so why change? It's very hard to make these changes. But when the science reaches a point where, wow, that's not good, and it's peer-reviewed and we know it, then we take action.
We're here today. In June, the governor directed the Bureau to review and revise our current upholstered furniture flammability standard, currently known as TB 117.
Of course, I want to thank Governor Jerry Brown, who has changed the course of this discussion once and for all, that we can do better. We want to bring Technical Bulletin 117 into the 21st century.
I'm Arlene Bloom. I have to say, you know, I've been talking about this for about 5 years, where I've just felt like this boring lady where you want to kind of move away from her at the dinner party because all she does is talk about flame retardants. And I had really wondered if I would go to my grave being the boring lady ranting about flame retardants. And then suddenly, after the Tribune article and the governor's press release, people like Dick Durbin, who's the majority whip in the Senate, were ranting about flame retardants, and we're really mad.
Thank you. We need to protect these children and these families when it comes to toxic chemicals. Let me tell you what the bottom line is. The Chicago Tribune series made it clear that over a span of decades, there was a campaign of marketing and deception. It makes no difference whether your grandbaby is a Democrat or Republican or an independent. We need to stand together as families across America to protect these kids. Thank you for being here today.
Health advocates in the chemical industry are facing off in Washington this week.
It's a move to update safety standards for chemicals used in everyday products. Today, Barbara Boxer's Senate subcommittee met to discuss the overhaul of the 1970s federal chemical regulation. The Safe Chemicals Act would allow the EPA to require proof that they are safe before they're put on the market. Among those testifying is a San Francisco firefighter.
I was contacted by Senator Lautenberg's office and asked to go back to Washington, D.C. to testify before a Senate committee in favor of the Safe Chemicals Act. I've been in enough situations in my life that dealt with life or death on the job as well as what I've gone through. And these are our representatives. They're working for us. Why should I be intimidated? The rates of contracting various forms of cancer in the firefighting profession is increasing. We are also fully aware that these flame retardant chemicals bioaccumulate in our blood.
Senator Lautenberg, Senator Lautenberg. Neurodevelopmental. Neurodevelopmental.
Meeting starts at 10 a.m. this morning. I'm ready.
The hearing will come to order. The purpose of this hearing is to review the need to reform the Toxic Substances Control Act, otherwise known as TSCA, the primary law that regulates chemicals in this country.
What we understand right now is that these are important chemicals that have to be dealt with because of their bioaccumulative process that is actually proven in medical science right now.
Okay.
My name is Hannah Pingree, and I thank you for this invitation. I'm here as the former Speaker of the Maine House. The fact that Washington is now really seemingly paying attention is exciting. I definitely did not imagine myself, sitting next to the chemtrail lobbyists and the other industry lobbyists and great California firefighter. But I felt good about it. I felt like I am exactly what we're talking about. I'm a pregnant woman who's being impacted by these chemicals, and so I should be here.
The Senate bill would mandate a new round of EPA review for every new use of a previously approved chemical and every significant increase in use of an existing chemical. The implications for EPA's overburdened resources, for EPA's ability to prioritize, and for industry's ability to innovate would be very significant.
Let me try to get an answer to my first question. Does Chemtura concede any danger from these two flame retardants that you've identified?
Again, in terms of the expected exposures, in 2006, CPSC published expected exposures or predicted exposures of TBB, and those are much lower than any level that was predicted to have any sort of an effect. So in those terms, the answer to your question would be that no, those are...
They're perfectly safe. Okay.
In Maine, we had an industry front group. We had many of the companies represented at this table, the American Chemistry Council, spending huge amounts of money, misleading legislators and doing whatever they could. I don't trust these companies to tell the truth about their chemicals, and I don't think the American public or you as senators should either.
I want to thank all of you for coming here today. So I have a question I want each of you to answer yes or no. There's no other answer, just yes or no. And I'm going to start with Hannah. Do you agree that chemical manufacturers should have to prove through unbiased studies that their products are safe for pregnant women, for infants, and for children before they can sell those chemicals in the United States?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, I agree.
Could you repeat the question?
Do you agree that chemical manufacturers should have to prove through unbiased studies that their products are safe for pregnant women, for infants, and for children before they can sell those chemicals in the United States?
Respectfully.
No, not respectfully. Yes or no?
Question cannot be answered without explanation.
Mr. Stefani.
Yes.
Thank you. Let me just say, I know that it's a little harder for lawyers to answer yes or no, but this one?
The fact that they are holding hearings and paying attention is a big deal. They got that it wasn't just about flame retardants, it was about the big picture. But the reality is the American Chemistry Council is working absolutely overtime to try to influence members of Congress to stop this bill. They know that it has traction with the American public, so they don't want it to get out really into the light of the day. If it's on the floor of the Senate, they know it's problematic because when you get a group of moms angry, politicians don't want to be on the other side of them.
We've brought the signatures of 130,000 Americans with us, gathered by many. We are delivering these signatures to our senators to show how many people want action.
When people's voices are heard, retailers might start taking action. Those kinds of changes are happening, but the only reason they happen is that regular people have stood up and said, "Look, we don't want to take it anymore."
So if there's a furniture company that wants to be part of the solution, we want to meet with them. We want to collaborate with them. We want to actually triangulate with them to force the chemical companies to stop making those furniture companies to use their chemicals. And then for companies that actually are just looking for a quick buck, we're going to kick them in the nuts and force them to stop.
Citizens for Fire Safety, they folded. So they said they folded. The website with the smiling children and the red brick Americana firehouse, that doesn't exist anymore. You know, I think the big question is, will the world change? It's not just our furniture, it's not just California Technical Bulletin 117. It really is about how we as a society view chemicals, how we vet them or don't vet them. And who are we listening to when we're being told these chemicals are safe, they work, they protect us, they are essential to our lives? Who are we listening to? It's really, I think, the crux of it.
So we're really excited about the new Technical Bulletin 117/2013 that's going to be put in place to eliminate these toxic chemicals.
Well, I'm optimistic when a small band of 1,000 people or 2,000 people can take on a multi-billion-dollar industry and say, we will stop you from using those poisonous chemicals in our furniture. We did that on people power. However, I don't think that we can celebrate yet. I hope what we did in California is, in a way, inspirational for the rest of the country to, in their legislatures, in Congress, and so on, to turn the spigot off on these poisons and have sane chemical policy.
Yeah, do you want some milk? Yeah. His name is Graham Allison Carr Stone, and Graham is a family name, and then Allison is our friend who passed away, Allison Green. And so we said, first baby, we said, okay, it's a boy, we'll give us another shot. If we have a girl, she can have Allison as her middle name. Well, we have a boy with Allison as his middle name, right after her, in her memory and her spirit.
Seeing firefighters that I worked with for years succumb to this hideous disease called cancer, it has a profound effect on my life on a daily basis. I know when I came in 1974, I was not concerned about cancer. It was the last thing on my mind. Every time that we rolled out our doors, we were going out for one reason, and that was to help somebody. And when you have a big fire, it gets to the point where, okay, we draw the line right here, and this is as far as that fire is going to go. We're going to put it out. You don't let the fire win. We win.